Obviously great at your defensive skill, but you also better be great on special teams. And the same thing with offensive players. So we're looking for great two-way players, and that's certainly an avenue that young guys can be a part of. But again, old guys, the best players will play on special teams.
And obviously, in return game, Chris Abrams was a guy last year with kickoffs, and I know Elijah Young got them too. When it comes to kickoffs, but also punt returning, what are you looking to figure out in fall campus to get started?
Yeah, we got a group of probably 5 or 6 guys as punt returners that are competing for that job. And so we're excited to see all those guys get out there and show us what they can do. And there's multiple components to that, right? It's obviously somebody that has dynamic ability is we're certainly looking for that can change games and make big plays. But there's also a dependability, a reliability factor, and that's considered with that. Decision making is a huge part of that. And then with kick returners, we feel like we got a handful of guys there. Like you mentioned, Chris Abrams-Drain, he did a really good job with that last year. Elijah Young's another guy that's had some really good returns over the last couple of years. Nate Pete's a guy that transferred that was one of the top return men in the Pac-12 conference a year ago. So certainly have a stable of guys there that we feel good about.
Yeah, and how much of it is also making sure that you take care of the football too? I mean, obviously, dynamic players, you've got those, but obviously it's an important part. But how big is it to just take care of the football?
Yeah, I mean that's our first goal as a punt return unit is to make sure that we give the ball to the offense, right? So that's decision making. That's knowing when to fair catch it, knowing when to communicate on short kicks or balls that are on the ground. There's like I said, there's a number of components that go into that. It's not just you put a dynamic athlete back there and say, go play. They obviously have to catch the ball, and there's a major difference between catching a punt at the high school level and catching a punt in the SEC. The punters and caliber of punters that we're playing against are extremely high, and that's a different deal. So there is a process, that takes a little bit of time to kind of get used to that. And again, that takes reps, that takes time. And we'll identify that throughout practices and scrimmages and in different situations.
I know we got Harrison, obviously, he's got a kicking game down, and that's nice that you don't have to worry about that. But when it comes to punter, how do you evaluate the punting job? Just what are some of the key components you're looking for?
Again, consistency is the number one thing. I mean, we really look at 2 key areas. When it comes to 3 key areas when it comes to our punters. One is we want a guy that can be as efficient as he possibly can, getting the ball out of his hands, and we refer to that as catch to kick. And then the other 2 are huge. Is putting the ball in the correct spot where we're trying to place the football from a field location standpoint, and then having matching hang and distance, right? So. If you kick a ball 40 yards, then you should have matching hang time, which is going to be, at least 4-second or more hang time. So that all goes into effect and into account, and whoever's the most consistent at doing that over time is going to end up being the guy. And really, it's that simple, but obviously there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah.
Yep.
With both punt and kickoff returns this year, what are you hoping to see and build off of last year, where there was flashes of success for sure, but potentially to build more with some of the guys you've got coming in?
Yeah, I mean, just again, when we get opportunities for returns, that we take advantage of it, right? We do a nice job of putting playmakers in a position to have success. But really in the return game, it comes down to the other 10 guys on the field doing their job and giving that return man the time and the space necessary to get a big return, right? So it's guys that are selfless, that are tough and are willing to do a great job, from that standpoint. So I think, again, just taking advantage of the opportunities that we get. Like you said, we had a couple a couple examples of getting guys in space and doing a nice job, and both phases are a little bit different. Kickoff return is obviously drastically different than punt return. And in punt return, there's multiple components, especially for the opponent, right? Sometimes some of your best returns come when you're actually trying to apply pressure and come after the punt, and as opposed to being in a true hold-up scheme or system. So there's a lot of different things that we look at, and we're certainly expecting big things.
Coach, who did you say the punting battle was between the three guys? You said Jack Stonehouse.
Jack Stonehouse, Sean Ketting, and Luke Bauer.
Cool. Thank you, Coach.
You talked a lot about the transfer portal. How just is this year different as a coach, staying on your toes, staying up to date with who's entered the portal?
Yeah, I mean it's all part of the process, right? We have a whole recruiting personnel department that really keeps us up to date and kind of who we need to evaluate and kind of go from there. They help us manage that, and it's just become part of the process. It's not necessarily that drastically different from an evaluation and recruiting standpoint. It's just a matter of, okay, who's winning the portal, what's our needs, and then us getting good evaluations and information on them, and just kind of managing that.
Coach Drinkwitz talked a lot in Atlanta just about his culture this year, entering his third season, no longer new. What's it like this year that you think is going to be a little bit different, especially entering training camp?
Yeah, I mean, I think just time, right? Like, we're going into year 3, and, for the most part, I mean, we have a lot of new faces, but we have a lot of guys that have been here with us all 3 years and that are familiar with the system and familiar with expectations. And so I don't necessarily think there's going to be a huge culture shift necessarily, but just that familiarity with expectations and just the day-to-day process that we go about, I think, is always critical. That continuity is big.